how'd you score the first 3 rounds?
I'm Jim.
Look at the stare of the champion against the challenger. The irresistible force meeting the immovable object.
Puts a left hook again. Jacks the jaw Smith. He's on roller skates and he comes back down. Oh! And down goes Smith. What a knockout! Mamma mia!
This is InTheFight.net's In the Fight show on Sportinarium Radio, talking MMA, pro wrestling, and boxing. Follow the show on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ITF Show. And now from Philadelphia, Doc, Brett, In the Fight.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to In the Fight. It is I, Brett Halpern, doing a solo mission. The captain, Michael Lipinski, unfortunately, is tied up at the moment. Actually, I'm not sure he's tied up. That'd be a little personal. I'm not sure if he's into that. What I meant to say is he's busy. Unfortunately, the hired gun also is busy. He was not able to step in on late notice. Apologies on behalf of the two of them. So, yes, we're all stuck with me, Brett Halpern. But anyways, most importantly, thank you for tuning in. Some big news to begin. Yes, we started out on Sportinarium Radio. However, there has been a brand name change, and Sportinarium Radio, which you're going to be able to find on the Sportinarium Radio player, it is going to be turning into Sports Wire Radio. I like the upgrade. The channel is, we're really putting out all efforts to put out great content, including In the Fight show. And that also includes, beginning September 3rd, the Goal Line Stand, which is actually myself and Mike's football podcast, which we do bring you once a week, a tremendous show talking all things football, college, pro, you name it. We are both football aficionados as well as combat sport aficionados. So we thank you for tuning into that. We are thrilled to be partnered with now SportsWire Radio. The bigger and better things to come for both the show, the station, as well as the rest of our co-patriots. I don't even know if that's a word, but you know what I'm getting at. Anyways, how do you find us? Well, we are on all social media at ITF Show. We additionally have our website, www.inthefight.net. Moreover, we have merch. Yes, that is right. We have merch. It is nice. It is comfortable. It is stylish. Go to TKO Store. That is TEEKO Store.com. Click on the collections selection and then go to In the Fight. And you will see we have several shirts that we currently offer. We're going to be designing more, but honestly, I love them. We've been getting very good reports from TKO Store. So thank you to those people who have already purchased shirts. But definitely get them, rep the show, talk about us, spread the word. And we thank you all for the support. This has really been a labor of love. We're also brought to you by Michael's Glass Company, the premier glass company of the Delaware Valley area, serving the Delaware Valley since 1978. 215-338-3293. Tell them Mike and Brett sent you. Also, for all of you in the Delaware Valley area, particularly those out on the main line, check out DePaul's Table. 7 East Lancaster Avenue, Ardmore, PA, a modern Italian steakhouse right in the heart of Ardmore, Pennsylvania. Tremendous food. The owner is absolutely tremendous. The chef that he brought over with him, fantastic. This is great food, great environment. For you guys out there trying to make an impression on a lovely lady, this would be an excellent date night. Then if you happen to see Anthony, who is the owner, please tell him that Mike and Brett sent you. Anthony, the owner, is one of the more special human beings on the face of the earth. We love him, and this is a great place. So there you go. Now, on to the show. What do we have? Well, we are going to run down the 3 Up, 3 Down from UFC 265, the pay-per-view that went down this past weekend. Also, we have a little quick preview of Bellator 264, as well as the first installment, I guess we could say, of the 2021 Professional Fight League playoffs. And then if there's time at the end, last week we had a really interesting segment where we went into the what ifs in the world of professional wrestling. And I figured, if we have some time, which we probably will since this is a solo show, I'm going to go into my what ifs in the world of mixed martial arts. And obviously, if any of you have any or would like to comment, by all means, like I said, at ITF Show, in thefight.net, follow us, comment, interact. We love it. Okay. So, without further ado, the 3 up from UFC 265. Oh, by the way, we also have one last Olympic combat sports 3 up winner as well. But so, without question, the number one person trending up after UFC 265 has to be Cyril Gane, who scored a TKO over Derek Lewis, 4 minutes, 11 seconds into round 3 to become the interim UFC heavyweight champion, to become France's first ever UFC champion. And I have to tell you, it looked easy. Cyril Gane, who now this is only his 10th professional fight, or this was his 10th professional fight, looked calm. He looked prepared. He has a style that may not necessarily be soothing or pleasing to the average fan. It's a defensively minded style, but he is incredibly athletic, powerful. He is very skilled. And I got to tell you, I am already immediately thinking that he's going to be able to take the main title off of his former training partner, Francis Ngannou. But anyways, let's get back to what occurred Saturday night. Honestly, it was when the fight was first announced, I thought this was going to be a very tough matchup for Derek Lewis. Cyril Gane is a master of distance control, and Derek Lewis needs to get up close to land that right hand. His own version of Dim Mak, right? That the death touch, which he possesses that power. But unfortunately, you have to be able to get near someone in order to hit them. And Cyril Gane is just so athletic, so skilled, whether it's through distance management, whether it's through his own strikes. Derek Lewis just simply was unable to close the gap, and really looked overwhelmed at times. I thought watching the UFC embeddeds leading up to the fight, the other thing that was really of note is there were several times where Derek Lewis talked about the pressure he felt fighting in Houston. And honestly, I almost feel as if while the UFC took advantage of it to get Houston's own to main event the card, I think for Derek Lewis personally, I think this was actually a little bit of a negative in that it was a mental distraction. He put a lot of pressure on himself. He was talking about that with Daniel Cormier in the pre-fight meetings with the media. So, look, I don't really think that, even though Derek Lewis, I think he only landed, I believe it was 16 punches the entire fight. To me, Derek Lewis is who he is. On any given day, he can knock out anyone on the planet. And who knows, maybe one day we will see him again in a title shot. He's still going to be able to fight the top contenders in the division. And on the right day, he can still beat the top contenders in the division. Cyril Gane, though, honestly, is just a cut above him with respect to being a mixed martial artist, with respect to athleticism, strategy. It just worked tremendously. And, for people who say, well, Cyril Gane is this passive fighter, look, Derek Lewis, not only is he an incredibly strong guy who has unbelievable power, he's an incredibly tough guy. So for Cyril Gane to lay it on him the way he did for several minutes in round 3 and hurting Derek Lewis the way he did, to the point where Derek Lewis did not want any more of that fight, Cyril Gane definitely possesses fight-altering power himself. So I think we definitely need to take that seriously. So, again, what's next? Well, what's next is Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou, for those who haven't seen, I believe check out, I want to say it's ESPN MMA's Instagram feed or it's Brett Okamoto's. And you'll see footage of Francis Ngannou and Cyril Gane when they used to be training partners in France under Fernand Lopez. And, I got to tell you, it's just training footage. We don't know the whole story. One of the guys could have been going harder that day. You don't know the full context. Cyril Gane looked really good. And we also know that Cyril Gane has grown leaps and bounds since whenever that time is. Now, so is Francis Ngannou. I think Francis will find similar issues with respect to trying to close the distance. I think he is more well equipped to close the distance as compared to Derek Lewis. But Cyril Gane, I got to tell you, I really, right now, I would favor him to beat Ngannou in a fight. It's obviously going to take place, I would think, towards maybe the December card, maybe January card, but it's going to take place rather soon, I would think, because Cyril Gane did not sustain any damage in this fight against Derek Lewis. It's going to be really interesting to see. Again, this is really big for France, who recently, just prior to the pandemic, legalized MMA. Francis Ngannou, after emigrating from Cameroon, went to France. Cyril Gane is from France, so this is a really big deal here. They're former training partners. I believe there is some bad blood in the manner in which Francis Ngannou left the camp in France, because now he trains out of Extreme Couture in Las Vegas. So there's a lot of interesting storylines there. Is this going to be a million pay-per-view buy card? No. But it doesn't have to be, and either way, it's going to be a very entertaining fight. Because similar to Derek Lewis, Francis Ngannou could put anyone in the world to sleep with one punch. So there's always that issue. And I do think that people forget that Francis Ngannou has a great chin, because Stipe Miocic in their first fight landed some tremendous shots against Francis Ngannou, and he kept coming forward. So I'm really excited for whenever that fight takes place. But for now, we have an interim champion, and his name is Cyril Gane. Congrats to him. As for the second fighter trending up after this weekend, going to go for Brazil's own Vicente Luque, who in the featured bout of the main card submitted Michael Chiesa 3 minutes and 25 seconds into round one via Darce choke. This was a crazy fight. I'm going to get a little bit more into it as well during the trending down section. But Luque sort of withheld or managed the storm that was Michael Chiesa, and in the middle of a quick grappling exchange was able to quickly lock up a Darce choke and submitted Michael Chiesa. He submitted other fighters in the past. I believe he's a brown belt in BJJ. And afterwards, he called out his friend Kamaru Usman for a welterweight title fight. And honestly, Vicente Luque is now the highest ranked UFC fighter in the welterweight division that Kamaru Usman has not fought. And I think he's probably earned a title shot. Now, my first thoughts as to that matchup, I think that Kamaru Usman's stand-up has come along to a point where, at the very least, he's essentially on the same level as Vicente Luque. In terms of the ground game, if Michael Chiesa was able to take down Vicente Luque with such authority with the double leg, Kamaru Usman will also be able to do that. And Kamaru Usman is far better with respect to top control and positional dominance. So I would highly favor Kamaru Usman in that matchup. But nevertheless, Vicente Luque has earned the right to test himself against the champion. And that's the great thing about MMA, is you never know. Vicente Luque is really, the quintessential mixed martial artist, very respectful guy. Also has in the past done training in New Jersey. So shout outs to him for that. But yes, he is the number 2 trending up after this weekend, after the UFC 265 card. The third fighter trending up after UFC 265 to me is bantamweight Song Yadong. Song opened up the main card with a very close and very hard-fought split decision win over Casey Kenny. To me, particularly given what has gone down in the bantamweight division as of late, the return of TJ Dillashaw, you have Aljamain Sterling fighting Peter Yan for the rematch soon. All the great fighters in the bantamweight division. It might be the most stacked division in the UFC. Song Yudong winning really was huge in terms of, because he and Casey Kenny, I believe, going into the fight were 9th and 10th ranked, respectively, in the bantamweight division. So for Song Yudong to win the fight, it sort of keeps his train running, right? Keeps the hype train running and enables him to move forward in the division. He's also super young. So, I don't even think we've seen close to the best version of Song Yudong. And he also possesses fight-ending power. Obviously, not in the heavyweight division where these guys are walking around at 260, but at 135. Nevertheless, Song Yudong, congrats to him. As I mentioned, I did want to, give a shout out to, really, first off, give a shout out to all the Americans who the United States did tremendously well in the Olympics. I believe we led the total medal count as well as the gold medals. And one of those I wanted to give a shout out to, trending upwards, was Gable Stevenson, who won the gold medal in the 125 kilogram men's freestyle wrestling competition. He defeated the previous world champion. It was a Georgian. Unfortunately, I forgot his name. In a last-second win. Gable Stevenson comes from University of Minnesota. He was the Dan Hodge winner. He was a national champion. We've seen him train with Brock Lesnar. He's interacted with both the WWE and the UFC. Actually, I believe it was yesterday morning. There was a tweet from him where he's waving to Dana White. So, look, this guy, he has the it factor too. He is incredibly athletic for a man his size, and is a born entertainer. So I'm very interested to see what's next for Gable Stevenson. It looks as if he's looking to turn to the professional ranks as opposed to staying in the amateur world and defending his Olympic medal title. But again, congrats to Gable Stevenson. Congrats to, honestly, all the Olympians across all the nations for representing their countries proudly. So with that, every time there's 3 up, there unfortunately has to be 3 trending down. And my first fighter trending down is Michael Chiesa. As I mentioned, he was submitted by Vicente Luque via Darce choke in round 1. After a brief sort of stalemate on the feet, Chiesa was able to get Luque down very easily with a forceful double leg, and quickly was able to get he almost had a full back mount. He didn't quite have his second hook in, but threatened several times with a rear naked choke and very nearly submitted Vicente Luque before Luque was able to scramble out and quickly lock up that Darce choke. And while taking nothing away from what Vicente Luque did, to me, I almost interpreted that fight, or when watching it, is like Michael Chiesa choking. And Michael Chiesa afterwards graciously, in a statement, was talking about how the moment got too big for him and he essentially panicked, and choked. And it's a shame because he really, whether it was him or Luque, it was going to set up a potential championship match, as I discussed, against Kamaru Usman. So, unfortunately, Chiesa, this has happened to him before, when he was a lightweight. Now he's now a welterweight. He had fought Kevin Lee. There was a big-time fight, a lot of emotions. He let that get the best of him, and Kevin Lee dominated him. So I think that's something that Michael Chiesa needs to address. He's a super smart guy and a very talented fighter. This is not the end of Michael Chiesa. It's simply just a roadblock. We're going to hear more from him and see more from him down the line. He's a very exciting, grappling-centric fighter, but really like him. But unfortunately for this week, he's definitely trending down. My number 2 trending down fighter is Rafael Fiziev. Rafael Fiziev was actually the winner of what I definitely thought was the fight of the night of the entire UFC 265 card. It was the main event of the prelims where he defeated Bobby Green via split decision. Was it a, you know what? I just want to confirm that it was a split decision. And actually, no, it was a unanimous decision. Excuse me. And either way, it was an absolutely tremendous fight. Back and forth. But I think, particularly given his previous performance against Renato Moicano, a lot of people, including me, thought even though this may be a step up and Bobby Green is a sort of this, wily veteran, that Fiziev would be able to sort of just walk through him en route to becoming a ranked lightweight, and sort of on his way to becoming a champion or a title contender. And it didn't turn out that way. I mean, he fought well, but I think you found a few holes in his game, even in his vaunted stand-up. So to me, excuse me, I think the hype train needs to be slowed down a little bit. I think that he needs to sort of rein in his style so that he could best be able to exert himself for a full 3 rounds and eventually a full 5 rounds, because at times it looked as if he was fading. I think he needs to become a little bit more defensively sound. But with that said, he's still tough as nails, still very entertaining to watch. But because the hype train was moving so fast and to me slowed down tremendously this weekend, I had to put him trending down. My third fighter that put trending down, unfortunately, is Karolina Kowalkiewicz. She lost her 5th straight fight to Jessica Penne via armbar submission, 4 minutes and 32 seconds into round 1. Karolina Kowalkiewicz is one of my favorite fighters. She came on the scene, very interesting style, very volume heavy, was really good in the clinch. She has a win over Rose Namajunas. She fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk when Joanna was the champion at UFC 205, nearly knocked Joanna out. I believe it was in the 4th round, gave her a very tough fight. It just looks as if she's one of those contenders that the game has sort of passed by. Her last fight was against Yan Xiaonan, and she suffered facial fractures. Now she, suffered what appeared to be a broken arm because of the armbar. It's 5 straight losses. I can't imagine the UFC is going to keep her around. I know she had thought about wanting to start a family. She has gotten married. So if this is the end of her career, I do congratulate her on that. But unfortunately, it definitely looks as if the game is passing her by and that she no longer has the ability to be a top contender in the UFC women's strawweight division. So for that, she is trending down. So there are your 3 up. Again, Cyril Gane, Vicente Luque, Song Yudong, with the Olympic trending up being Gable Stevenson. 3 down, Michael Chiesa, Rafael Fiziev, and Karolina Kowalkiewicz. So what do we have coming up this weekend? Well, there's actually no UFC event. But rest easy. On Friday, there's actually 2 events. We have Bellator 264 as well as the first installment of the 2021 PFL playoffs. So first, Bellator 264. By the way, it's really interesting. Bellator has now caught up to the UFC in terms of numbered events. Now, obviously, the UFC has fight nights, which they don't count, and I've previously complained because you have, now there's UFC Vegas, there's UFC on ESPN, there used to be UFC on FX, UFC on Fuel. I don't know why they don't just count all of those as fight nights. That's a separate discussion. But, we just finished UFC 265. Now there's Bellator 264. Maybe I'm strange and I'm the only one that finds that interesting. And if so, I'm sorry for wasting 30 seconds of your life. Anyways, on to the preview. In the main event, we have Gegard Mousasi against John Salter for the middleweight title. To me, I think this is a clear-cut, easy victory for Gegard Mousasi, who is, one of the more established veterans in the sport of mixed martial arts. I think he's literally fought in almost every promotion in the last 10 years, all the major ones, Strikeforce, Ryzen, Dream, UFC, Bellator, you name it. Very well-rounded fighter. If he's no longer at the top of his game, he is not far from it. I think John Salter, who, we saw even back in the day, I think he was, UFC 118, UFC 125. He's definitely come a long way since then. I just think Gegard Mousasi has too many tools. I think other than that, I'm excited to see Magomedov fight, as well as the Sabah Hamasi versus Andrei Koreshkov fight on the main card. I think Andrei Koreshkov is a super talented fighter. And Pam Sorensen is actually going to be headlining the prelim card, which you can catch on MMAJunkie.com. With respect, again, to the PFL playoffs, we have the welterweight and lightweight semifinals. The main event of the night is going to be Ray Cooper against Rory McDonald. I got to tell you, particularly given the way Gleison Tebow fought Rory McDonald, I definitely can see or envision a scenario with Ray Cooper winning. It's amazing. There was a time when Rory McDonald, I think, was the uncrowned champion, the best welterweight in the world. And this is definitely a case to me of someone who, earlier I was speaking about Karolina Kowalkiewicz, where the game has passed her by. I don't think the game has passed by Rory McDonald, but I think this is more of an example of someone who's been in so many wars. I think about the Robbie Lawler fights in particular, with the busted nose and some of the other beatings that he's sustained, even in wins, that I think that it really, it's an amazing sport, but it's also a very brutal sport, and you leave a part of you in that cage, in that octagon, whatever organization you're in, and you're never quite the same. And particularly when it's a fight that is that physical, that has that much violence, you sustain a lot of damage. You're never quite the same. So, to me, I don't really know. It's going to be a very interesting fight. The second semifinal is Magomed Karimov. Yep, I did say that right. Versus Sadibou Sai. Magomed Karimov, I believe, is actually the number one seed in this tournament. I suspect that he will very easily defeat his opponent. I am favoring him to win the welterweight tournament. At lightweight, you have Clay Collard, who had earlier this season defeated Anthony Pettis against Raush Manfio, and then Alex Martinez versus Loic Radzhabov. Look, I think the PFL has done a nice job. I've talked about this with both Mike and with Zach. I like the presentation. I think sometimes all of the statistics, which are very interesting, all this, showing how fast the strikes are, the different strike numbers, it just gets a little busy for me. And I feel like I'm looking at that more than I'm looking at the fight. Aside from that, I think that the PFL's done a nice job of becoming a viable organization. They've gotten some good acquisitions. Interestingly, none of them have really worked out. Rory McDonald probably being the best one. I mean, Anthony Pettis, unfortunately, did not make the playoffs for the lightweight division. What's his name? Fabricio Verdum, former UFC heavyweight champion, unfortunately did not work out. I don't have to get that phone call, but someone's trying to reach me. I'm a very popular guy. So either way, I do think the PFL has done a nice job. I think they're going to continue to get more named fighters and become a viable second or third MMA organization in the country. So either way, the main card is on ESPN Plus, I believe, Friday night. So check that out. So Friday night will be a good night of MMA for all of you fans out there. I know I will be checking in. In terms of MMA scheduling news, not as much as last week, although there is another fight. That UFC 268 card really is shaping up to be special. The UFC has booked a fight between two real up-and-coming middleweight prospects. Eben Shabazian is going to be taking on Nasruddin Imavov. Imavov is fresh off his second round stoppage over Ian Heinisch. Shabazian has lost 2 fights recently, looking to rebound, but I think this is really a great fight. Should be a stand-up affair, which would benefit Shabazian. So it's definitely going to be an interesting fight. Speaking of UFC 268, I think Mike and I may have touched upon this last episode. The co-main event, which currently is scheduled to be Michael Chandler against Justin Gaethje, that is that's as good as you can get in terms of MMA fights. I mean, that is technique, athleticism, and violence all mixed up into one beautiful package that us MMA fans love. Having said that, one issue may be that Michael Chandler, by the time of the event, which is November 6th, may not actually be vaccinated. And the reason he is given is that he is still hesitant to get the vaccination because it is not yet fully approved by the FDA. It's only still under the emergency use authorization. Look, Mike and I have, it seems like it's every week now, talked about and voiced our frustrations over people's hesitancies and crazy concocted stories and citing ridiculous conspiracy theories regarding vaccination. With this, I know that the FDA is close to making this, fully approving this, so hopefully Chandler can get vaccinated before, beyond the, I don't know why he couldn't beforehand. Again, it's incredibly frustrating, but I don't want to waste any more breath on that. But either way, I do hope that the fight is going to take place. I just hope it takes place on that card. There's something about Madison Square Garden, having attended the last Madison Square Garden card with Zach, the hired gun, which was the BMF championship fight between Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal. There really is something special about watching combat sports in Madison Square Garden. It is the world's most famous arena. You're watching a fight where in that same footprint was, Ali Frazier 1 and 2, where you had fighters such as Roberto Duran and other famous fighters, Evander Holyfield, Lennox Lewis, so many other fighters just, put it all on the line. And there's a great lineage there in the combat sports realm. And there's just a heightened sense of importance. So I think that fight taking place on that card really would make it special. So, hopefully Chandler gets it. We will keep you updated with respect to that. And now, as I mentioned, we have some time left because it's a solo show, which typically goes a little quicker. And as I mentioned last week, we had our what ifs in the world of professional wrestling. And this week, I just wanted to kind of throw out there some of my what ifs in the world of MMA. And again, if you have any of your own, if you want to comment on some of the ones that I'm listing right now, by all means, comment. We're now on YouTube. We're on Facebook. We have our Facebook group. Again, at In the Fight Show, or at ITF Show, excuse me. You'll find all the ways to get in touch with us. Also, www.inthefight.net. Again, we would love to hear from you. So for me, what are some of the biggest questions or biggest what ifs in the world of MMA? I think you have to start with, what if there was no Ultimate Fighter? I think that there's a good chance that this podcast doesn't exist. As Mike and I discussed literally on our first episode of this podcast, which we call The Roots of Fight, what were our roots of fandom for combat sports. Mike and I, we are best of friends, known each other since we're 8 years old. We literally both started watching independent of each other, although we talk to each other every day. We started watching The Ultimate Fighter, I think within a week of each other. And that's how we got hooked. And that's how so many of us got hooked and introduced to the sport. I was aware of the UFC. I think I even had one of the UFC video games. But I wouldn't have called myself a fan. You know, I would have been able to name 4 or 5 fighters, and that's about it. But nevertheless, that's what got me hooked. And I don't think the UFC, I don't think MMA is as popular as, it's about as mainstream as it's ever been. It's not on ESPN. It would not be on ESPN. It just wouldn't be in the state it's in today. So that kind of broke us down into different kind of categories. Another one is like organizations. So to me, what if Pride wasn't influenced by the Yakuza? Maybe Japanese MMA would have a much bigger presence than it does now. Maybe Pride would still exist. You know, back when The Ultimate Fighter first aired, the UFC, while they broke through, they weren't the number one MMA organization in the world. They did not have the best MMA fighters. Pride did. So I think that's an interesting question. Also, what if Josh Barnett didn't pop for PEDs before Affliction 3? He was slated to fight Fedor Emelianenko in the main event of Affliction 3. Affliction had put on 2 very popular shows. I think even in some way that the Trump brand was associated with Affliction. And Barnett tested positive. I believe it was like literally the day or 2 before the event. And not only did they cancel the card, they literally canceled the fighting promotion. So it was rather remarkable. And then to me, you know, perhaps the biggest one is what if Ken Shamrock hadn't busted his head, which led the Shaws to book Kimbo Slice against late replacement Seth Petrozelli. For those that don't know, when Seth Petrozelli knocked out Kimbo Slice, who was the face of Elite XC, Kimbo Slice was originally scheduled to fight Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock, as I just mentioned, actually had busted his head or something, injured himself during warm-ups. And the Elite XC guys are like, oh, we'll just stick in Seth Petrozelli, not realizing Seth Petrozelli is a legitimate MMA fighter, and more particularly a very good stand-up fighter who knocked out Kimbo Slice very easily, and I believe it was like 15 seconds, which brought an end to Elite XC. The next category to me is sort of like fights that never happened, or some kind of related to fights. So to me, you know, one of the biggest ones, a lot of them involve Fedor Emelianenko. So what if Fedor had fought Randy Couture? We all remember Randy Couture essentially left the UFC on a quest to fight Fedor, even though he was under contract with the UFC, and that never happened. Apparently, we were very close to having Fedor versus Brock Lesnar. What about Fedor versus Cain Velasquez? Speaking of Brock Lesnar made his debut not in the UFC, but it was actually an Elite XC K1 supercard that took place in the LA Memorial Coliseum. He eventually fought a Korean judoka who was a tough guy in his own right, but he was initially scheduled to fight 7'2" Hongman Choi. And to me, one of Brock Lesnar's weaknesses as an MMA fighter is particularly when a striker sort of was more aggressive against him, he would sort of turtle up. And Hongman Choi was a decorated striker at 7'2". So I always thought, what if Hongman Choi fought Brock? I mean, maybe Brock, particularly in his first fight, would have been, was incredibly green. And maybe Brock loses interest in MMA altogether. Another one of my big ifs, 2 of them have to do with Cain Velasquez, which is what if Cain Velasquez trained in Mexico City for his fight against Fabricio Verdum? Cain Velasquez was historically known as having, ungodly amounts of cardio, but for whatever reason, when he did not choose to train in Mexico City where there's high elevation, And we saw he gassed out against Fabricio Verdum. And also, with respect to Cain, what if he had a healthy career? I think if so, we would be calling Cain Velasquez and not Stipe Miocic the greatest heavyweight of all time. That's how good I believe Cain was or could have been. Another one is, what if there was no USADA in the UFC? How big of a human being would Vitor Belfort or Alistair Overeem be right now? Would either of them become champion? What if Anderson Silva wasn't clowning with Chris Weidman in their first fight at UFC 162? Would Anderson Silva had won? And had he won, he wouldn't have had to have the rematch where he broke his leg. What if Ronda Rousey handled losing better? Maybe she would have been able to rebound from either the Holly Holm fight, the Amanda Nunes fight. Maybe she would realize she needed a different style. Maybe she would have switched camps. You never know. What if Conor stayed focused? What if Conor McGregor, after UFC 205, where he defeated Eddie Alvarez to become the champ, the featherweight and lightweight champ, what if he just kept fighting in MMA? I guess maybe we wouldn't have proper number 12, although I don't drink, so I'll defer to all of you out there whether or not that's good. You wouldn't have had the fight with Floyd Mayweather. Just it would have been interesting to see where his career was. Another one of mine is, what if Yoel Romero, or I guess even Brock Lesnar, what if they started MMA earlier in life? Yoel, I think, started at the age of 36, 37. One of the most physically gifted, well, even Brock Lesnar, but particularly I think Yoel, one of the most physically gifted, not even athletes, but human beings ever to walk this earth. I can't imagine how good he would have been had he been able to start his MMA career at a younger age. And speaking of, if MMA was around, what if MMA was around back in the 50s or 60s? For a guy like Danny Hodge, who was a tremendous amateur wrestler. I believe he was a Golden Gloves boxer. For a guy like Judo Gene LaBelle, who, also, I believe, trained with like Ed Strangler Lewis, Carl Gotch. These are guys who had to find alternate ways of making a living. All of them sort of turned to professional wrestling. Perhaps if you had MMA back then, obviously you had Vale Tudo in Brazil. You had Brazilians and Japanese fighting one another, but it really wasn't a way to make a living. If you had MMA back then, it would be, I wonder how it would have affected the professional wrestling world. So these are just some of my what ifs. I would love to hear what some of yours are. I would love to hear, your comments as to mine. And as always, it's just been such a pleasure. Not only today, but just in general. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. We are super excited about the new direction of SportsWire Radio. And again, check us out at ITF Show, all social media, inthefight.net's our website, merch, TKOstore.com, TEEKOstore.com, Michael's Glass Company, 215-338-3293. Tell them Mike and Brett sent you. If you're hungry, if you would like a great meal, DePaul's Table, 7 East Lancaster Avenue, Ardmore, PA. Please tell Anthony, the owner, that Mike and Brett sent you. Again, I hope everyone is safe. Have a wonderful week. Look forward to speaking with you guys next week. Take care.